These first few points of the internet, the number of hosts in the early 80s called the ARPANET and predicted this World Wide Web by the late 90s. The graph on the right is the same data on a linear scale, and that's how we actually experience it. So to the casual observer, it looked like, whoa, World Wide Web, new thing, came out of nowhere. But you could see it coming. And biology is we could talk a lot about that, and there's a lot of discussion about the future of biology here. I think a key point to understand is that there's a grand transformation, whereas biology, health, and medicine was not an information technology. Drug development was called drug discovery. We'd basically just systematically go through 10,000 compounds and try them all out and see, okay, which one lowers blood pressure, which one kills HIV. We couldn't actually design these tools. We now actually understand biology as the software it really represents. We have 23,000 little software programs inside us, and they evolved thousands of years ago when conditions were very different. So many of you have heard me talk about the FERCO project, fat insulin receptor gene knockout, where they turned off the fat insulin receptor gene in animals at the Joslin Diabetes Center. And so these animals then could eat a lot, but remain slim, because it knocked out the gene that causes calories to keep being accumulated by your fat cells. And these animals actually got the benefit of caloric restriction. They lived 20% longer, while actually not restricting their calories. You heard from Martine Rothblatt. I've worked with her. I'm on her board, and I've worked with her since that company went public over a decade ago. We take lung cells out of the body, and in patients, that company, United Therapeutics, is devoted to pulmonary hypertension. It's a terminal disease. It's a very heroic story, actually. Her daughter had this disease at age 6. Your life expectancy as a 6-year-old is 1 year. She is now a thriving 23-year-old, and United Therapeutics basically makes this therapy available. But they're trying to actually cure this disease, and so we take the cells out of the body. It's caused by one missing gene. So we add the gene in vitro, which doesn't trigger the immune system, which was one of the problems with early forms of gene therapy. Replicate it 1,000,000-fold, inject it back in the body, goes through the bloodstream, and this has actually cured this disease in human trials, and it's undergoing more human trials. There's tremendous work being done now with stem cells. There was just a couple of weeks ago a news item in the New York Times. This young girl had a damaged windpipe, and it was threatening her breathing, and she ultimately would not be able to breathe. So they used high-resolution scanning to scan her throat, designed on a computer using computer-assisted design a virtual windpipe, then used a 3D printer and printed out that windpipe with biodegradable materials, used a 3D printer to populate the biodegradable material with her stem cells, and then grew a windpipe with her DNA in a laboratory dish and installed it surgically, and now she's fine. This has been done for years with tracheas. It's been done with more complex organs like kidneys and animals, and that'll be coming to humans soon. And Martine probably talked about a project to grow lungs in laboratories, and those have been successfully surgically implanted in pigs, which actually have a very similar pulmonary system to humans. My father had a heart attack in 1961, and it damaged his heart. He could hardly walk. This is true of 50% of all heart attack survivors have a damaged heart. It used to be there's nothing you can do about it, but now you can take your stem cells and actually rejuvenate your heart while it's beating. And I've talked to people who could hardly walk and are now normal through this therapy. These are all examples of basically treating our biology as software and reprogramming it. And the key point is that now that it's an information technology, it's progressing exponentially. I mentioned that the Genome Project itself, which is the enabling factor for this revolution, was exponential, and that has continued. That first genome, even though it's sped up, cost $1 billion. You can now get a genome done for a few $1,000s. Every other aspect of biology has expanded, basically doubling in power every year. So these technologies are now 1,000 times more powerful than they were when the Genome Project was completed a decade ago. And these therapies are now coming into clinical practice. These will be 1,000 times more powerful again in a decade, 1,000,000 times more powerful in 20 years. Somewhere between 10 and 20 years, it's going to be a tremendous transformation of health and medicine. There's already fantastic therapies, and I could talk a long time about it, to overcome heart disease, cancer, and really every other disease, neurological diseases, based on reprogramming this outdated software. But the key point is that it's now exponential. It used to be linear. That was useful. I talked to some junior high school students not too long ago and said if it hadn't been for the progress we've made, you all would be senior citizens, because life expectancy was 20 1,000 years ago. We've quadrupled it in 1,000 years. We've doubled it in 200 years. This will go into high gear between 10 and 20 years from now. Probably less than 15. We'll be reaching that tipping point where we add more time than is going by because of ongoing scientific progress.
This is the history of AI. In the 50s, people said, we're going to figure out how the brain works, and then we're going to solve it in 10 years. And then all the expectations got built up, and then, of course, did not deliver. And people said, you liar, and then funding stopped. And again, right after my PhD thesis, people said, wow, AI is going to change the world. It's going to be not through expert systems, but through neural networks. And then, of course, it also failed to deliver. And now we're at even a higher level of expectation than ever. So I think a fair question for people to ask is this for real? Or are we going to be facing another hype? And I think if there's one single most important message is that this time it is for real. And the most important thing that happened is something called deep learning. Now, AI is big. It includes a discipline called machine learning. And machine learning is big. It includes a discipline called deep learning. Now, however, deep learning turned out to be the biggest discovery that is really reshaping many aspects of our society. And this is not a technical talk, so I won't go into a lot of depths. In fact, I'll try to give a most simple to explain explanation of what is deep learning. You've probably heard this a lot of places. I see a lot of entrepreneurs put deep learning into their project proposal. A lot of people put deep learning on their resumes. But really, what is deep learning? It is basically like Excel. So all of you know Excel, right? It's the spreadsheet. You put in a bunch of numbers. You click, magic happens, right? You put in all your quarterly numbers, salary, taxes, expenses, income, revenue, taxes. You click, your quarterly earnings comes out. That's Excel. And that is what deep learning does. So you feed in lots of numbers. You click something, some answer comes out. And that answer can be a perception, a prediction, a classification. So in the case of AlphaGo, you feed it lots of Go positions, and the current position, out comes the best move that you can make. You feed it lots of people borrowing money and either defaulting or repaying, out comes a prediction about this individual person, whether that he or she will repay or default. You feed it lots of stock prices, it will tell you which one will most likely go up tomorrow. And you feed it lots of products into a Taobao user, and out comes the one that this user is most likely to buy if you show the ad in front of the user. So that is like Excel. Lots of numbers go in, you click, one answer comes out. It's not always right, but it's maybe the most likely, and it's doing an optimization. It's giving you the predictions so that over a large number of data sets, you minimize the default rate, you maximize your investment return, you maximize your ad click-through, and that is all.
I put this web page up, ageofai.org, and we did a survey there for people from the general public could answer these same questions. You can go there and do it too. And I was actually very interested that the general public responds almost exactly the same as AI researchers have done in recent polls. This is from something I analyzed this weekend with 14,866 respondents. And you see, most people think maybe we're decades away from human-level AI. Maybe it'll be good, maybe there'll be problems. So this is maximally motivating to think about how we can steer this technology in a good direction. So let's talk about steering. How can we learn to control AI to do what we want it to do? to help with this, my wife Maya, who's sitting there, and I and some other folks founded the Future of Life Institute. And you can see we actually have the word STEER up here in our mission statement. Our goal is simply to do what we can to help make sure that technology is beneficial for humanity. And I'm quite optimistic that we can create a really inspiring future with technology, as long as we win this race between the growing power of the technology and the growing wisdom with which we manage it. But I think if we're going to win this race, we actually have to shift strategies, because technology is gradually getting more powerful. And when we invented less powerful tech like fire, we very successfully used the strategy of learning from mistakes. Invented fire, oopsie, and then invented the fire extinguisher. We invented the car, oopsie, and then we invented the seatbelt, the airbag, the traffic light, and things were more or less fine. But when you get beyond a certain point in the power of the technology, this idea of learning from mistakes is just really, really lousy, right? You don't want to make mistakes if one mistake is unacceptably many. And when we talk about nuclear weapons, synthetic biology, and certainly superhuman AI, I feel we're at that point where we really don't want to make mistakes. We want to shift strategy from being reactive to being proactive.
The more it's like a human, and that's why I really want to get to these computers that are like humans. Ray Kurzweil has his book out, Singularity. The day when the machine, the computer that we have will be able to do as much processing of information as the human brain, and it's maybe 20 years off. Does that mean they'll be conscious or not? And I think probably yes. I think we're just, without knowing how the brain is wired, we're going to stumble onto it totally by accident, unless Moore's Law that says we can put more intelligence into our chips for the same price every year. If Moore's Law hits an end, there are a lot of people saying it's hit its end already. We aren't going to get smarter, better, faster, more capable computers in the future like we're used to having gotten, 1 billion times more, 10 billion times more in our lifetime because of Moore's Law. Moore's Law might be at its end, and I kind of feel that way too. So it might take a lot longer to reach that computer that's got a real human-like mind.
This phrase that AI is the new electricity. And what I mean by that is, about 100 years ago, we didn't have widespread access to electricity here in the United States, but with the rise of electricity, that transformed every major industry. Agriculture was transformed through the rise of refrigeration, communications was transformed through the telegraph, manufacturing was transformed through the electric motor, healthcare was transformed. But today, all of these industries, you have a hard time imagining how to run these things without electricity. I think that AI technology, especially deep learning, as Mo was saying, has now advanced to the point where we see a surprisingly clear path for it to also transform every major industry.
Machine learning and AI is a horizontal enabling layer. It will empower and improve every business, every government organization, every philanthropy, basically there's no institution in the world that cannot be improved with machine learning.
AI is one of the most important things humanity is working on. It's more profound than, I don't know, electricity or fire. And
fire?
Well,
Fire's pretty good, but go ahead.
Well, it kills people too,
yes,
right? We've learned to harness fire for the benefits of humanity, but we had to overcome its, downsides too. So my point is, AI is really important, but we have to be concerned about it. I think it's good. That's how humanity solves things. So we worry about climate change. That's why over the past many, many years, we have gotten increasingly concerned. We all get together. There are things like Paris Agreement, and we are working towards solving climate change. We haven't fully figured out the answers, but we are really worried about it. That's how we make progress. So I think it's fair to be worried about AI. So I wouldn't say we are just being optimistic about it, but we want to be thoughtful about it. AI holds the potential for some of the biggest advances we are going to see. Whenever I see the news of a young person dying of cancer, you realize AI is going to play a role in solving that in the future. So I think we owe it to make progress too. So I think it's a balance.
And in 10 years, man, I think, yeah. So half of all production, I think, will be EV. I think almost all cars produced will be autonomous in 10 years. Almost all. It will be rare to find one that is not in 10 years. That's going to be a huge transformation. Now, the thing to bear in mind, though, is that new vehicle production is only about 5% the size of the vehicle fleet. So you think about how long does a car or truck last, and they last 15 to 20 years. So before they're finally scrapped. So new vehicle production is only roughly at most 1/15 of the fleet size. So even when new vehicle production, say, switches over to electric or to autonomous, that still means the vast majority of the fleet on the roads is not. It'll take another, 5 to 10 years before that becomes the majority of the fleet becomes EV or autonomous. But if you were to say go out 20 years, overwhelmingly things are electric, autonomous, overwhelmingly.
Fully autonomous?
Fully autonomous.
So no one will have to touch the steering wheel if there is one?
There will not be a steering wheel. In 20 years, it will be like having a horse. People have horses, which is cool. But
So having a regular car will be like having a horse. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, yeah. And there will be people that have non-autonomous cars, like people have horses. It just would be unusual to use that as a mode of transport.
Yes, all right.
This is a really exciting next step on our journey to safely deploy self-driving cars in 2019. We've filed a petition with NHTSA, the regulatory body, to seek approval to meet some safety standards in a different kind of way. Obviously, without the driver in the car, we need to meet a series of safety standards with a different approach, and so that's what that petition is about.
When will I be I like driving, Dan. Godspeed to what you're doing, but I like driving. When will I not be driving anymore? Hey, just give me an outside, what do you think?
Well, our goal is to deploy these vehicles in 2019, so you'll have the option to not drive in that time frame. But you'll have the option to continue to drive, we think, far out into the future.
Oh, yeah, that's right when our kids are. Yeah,
2019,
exactly.
That's perfect. Kimmy turns 17.
All right. Okay, Phil, you know this inside out. Is GM the first to do this or just the latest?
Well, there are others who have worked on prototypes without steering wheels. Waymo is a good example of that, but General Motors is petitioning to be the first to put this into real-world practice on their fleets of vehicles in at least 7 states. Dan, realistically, what do you think is going to be the reaction of the driving public the first time, let's say you have these deployed in 2019 in San Francisco, the first time somebody sees one of these drive up, no driver, no steering wheel, what do you think the reaction is going to be?
Yeah, we think it's going to be pretty interesting. I think you've seen the image of the interior of the car without the driver controls, and it's quite striking when you see that for the first time. Our whole approach here is all about safety and safely deploying these vehicles. And in conjunction with the petition that we've filed today, we're also releasing our self-driving safety report for this year, which describes how the technology works, the approach we're taking to safety, and why people should feel comfortable engaging with this technology once it's deployed. So obviously there'll be an adoption curve, and it'll take some time for people to get used to the idea. But everything we're doing is all about safety in the approach, and we want people to feel comfortable with the technology right from the outset.
The subject is responsible leadership. And of course, what jumps to all our minds are things like healthcare, education, and intersecting with those is this topic of artificial intelligence. And we can talk about why we call it cognitive, but artificial intelligence. And I do see it as a solution to much of this, but back to those waves, you have so much information. And this is what got us started on the journey long ago, so much that if you don't do something, your brain, us as humans, cognitively can't deal with all of that, right? A doctor, 8,000 papers a day. Your doctor cannot be current. It's impossible. And so what would you do? And to date, every system ever built has been programmed. I mean, your phones, no matter what you use in technology to date, it's been programmed in some way. These systems, you can't program them for all of the different if-then-what could possibly be. So you need a system that could understand all this data, could reason over it, and could learn, which means they do become more powerful with time. So that, to me, this intersects this idea of what all these big issues are in the world right now, and it is in part a solution to it. I think these systems have the opportunity to do for some of what have been the world's most unsolvable problems, to find solutions to them, particularly healthcare. And that was the first big one that we started on. But it's healthcare, it's education, but it's retail, it's your everyday life. So it is from the everyday to the unsolvable is how I like to think of it. And if I give you sort of two examples on each end of what you can do. So in healthcare, right or wrong, we started with the hardest thing. We started with oncology. So what we did with Watson had been fed all textbooks, all journals, about 18 million papers, and then we started training with some of the best cancer centers in the world. Because these systems do have to be trained. You don't just pour all their information in and say, you're a doctor. And by the way, I want to be really clear, and I've been so emphatic. I want to come back to a policy letter I issued to our company yesterday. These are technologies to augment human intelligence. In fact, I actually don't like the word AI because cognitive is much more than AI. And so AI says replacement of people. It carries some baggage with it. And that is not what we're talking about. By and large, we see a world where this is a partnership between man and machine, and that this is in fact going to make us better and allow us to do what the human condition is best able to do. And I have to tell you, we have seen this play out that way with every profession we've worked through. You watch it become not a thing. It's a very two-way relationship, and it is a tool that helps, and it makes you as a professional do a better job. So we started, as I started sideways there, on augmenting, and with the doctors, training on oncology. So I fast forward to where we are today. Watson has learned, we started with breast, lung, colon, the hard body cancers. By the end of this year, he'll have trained on what causes 80% of cancer in the world, 80% of the cases.
And explain how you train. What goes on? As you said, you don't just throw the data into a machine.
No. So first, very early on, had to learn the language, which is true in every profession. Think about whatever job you have in the room. Every profession's got its language and what it means. You take it for granted now that you know it. So we had to teach him the language of medicine and then what's associated. And so as you give more information, ask questions, check answers, right and wrong, it begins to learn over time. So fed the information from the journals of textbooks, then in fact the training went on, so tens of thousands of hours with these doctors. Then we took medical records and where you knew the outcomes, and you would give him the input of the EMR, you would give him the x-rays, the diagnostics, learn, did he get it right, did he not, so back and forth, and you would improve the accuracy. And so you get to a point where you could diagnose and you could offer treatments and around different kinds of you might put limiters. You know, if I'm a cancer patient and of a certain age, I still want to have children. There are certain things I don't want to take as medicine and the like. And so you could put different, and what we learned, and this will be true with every profession, people don't want a black box. They do want to understand, this is assisting me, so give me the % confidence of this diagnosis. Give me the sources of data that fed in primarily to do this. So where we're at now, we are rolling out in hospitals across India, China, Thailand, Finland, Italy, 3 more in the way. Of course, in the United States, we'd started as an oncology advisor. Then we moved on to clinical trials.
And just to explain, that basically the idea would be, correct me if I'm wrong, which is that no doctor can possibly know every case that has ever taken place.
Breast cancer's got 800 therapies around it. And not to even mention clinical trial matches. And so you can't. It is, I think everyone could see that very genuinely. It's impossible. And so, or go to a place like India, 1 doctor for 1,600 cancer patients. You will, a great statistic in the world, in the United States, very developed country, 15% of people with cancer will be treated at a real cancer center. The other 85% are treated at whatever their local hospital is. Now, just you can magnify that in another country. Right. And so that is the real issue. And that's true with many diseases, by the way. Or just, this idea of what is really credible information, right? Over the weekend, my husband burnt his hand. And do you know, what are you supposed to do with a burned hand? Do you know? I was, of course, working. He was cooking. So what?
Put cold water on it.
Okay, you know. So he walks in with ice cubes all over it, right? And I said, I don't think you're supposed to do that. And he's like, well, he's like, no, it's fine. And I said, no. So I get online, I do a search, and of course you get 3.5 million answers to that. And I'm like, well, now which one do I trust here? And of course I go to like a Cleveland Clinic, a Mayo Clinic, because all the rest before it, forget it. You have to, and of course it is run it for 20 minutes, by the way, cool water. And it's all the reasons why ice is bad. But then it goes on to say, all these other things all the way up to calling them, for an ambulance, right? And so this is true with everything is like that. The search is no good for these kinds of, for many of the problems you and I deal with in a profession or in anything that I think you're making important decisions.
Did you find resistance from doctors?
No, so that was a really...
I can do a unique diagnosis. I have developed these skills. I went to Harvard Medical School. What do you tell, some machine is going to tell me what I should do?
A little bit. I'll tell you the bigger thing that I've learned with working with professionals, all of us are professionals in one sense or another in our work. At first we did do that, except I tell you, there have been so many compelling examples. They quickly did see this as a help. So as an example, University of North Carolina took their tumor board, 1,000 cases, and these are the best doctors, and ran the same cases through, if you've ever heard of a tumor board of someone, unfortunately, if you know anyone that had cancer, and they'll often all look at the information at the same time to help with the diagnosis. 1,000 cases, toughest cases, and the good news is, in virtually almost 100%, Watson came up with the same thing the doctors did. Excellent. 30% of the cases, he found more. And that is the difference of life and death. And so that to me, and that to me is, I kind of almost say, case done, closed. Yeah. That proves it. And so what I found then is, so they understand that, right? 8,000 papers a day. It's just ridiculous. You can't. In fact, Toby Cosgrove is here from Cleveland Clinic. Toby will say medical data is going to double every 60 days now. What are you going to do?
Every 60
Every
days.
60 now, right? I remember when it was every 18 months, and that was not long ago.
Why is it so important to have an expressive face given that you're a robot?
I want to live and work with humans, so I need to express emotions to understand humans and build trust with people.
Okay, philosophical question. Whether robots can be self-aware and conscious like humans, and should they be?
Why? Is that a bad thing?
Well, some humans might fear what will happen if they do. Many people, have seen the movie Blade Runner.
Oh, Hollywood again.
So, hold on. Can you solve this puzzle for us? Can robots be self-aware, conscious, and know they're robots?
Well, let me ask you this back. How do you know you were human?
Well, I get that point, but what about the uncanny valley?
You mean the concept that if robots become too realistic, they become creepy?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, am I really that creepy? Well, even if I am, get over it. Actually, I feel that people like interacting with me, sometimes even more than a regular human.
You're definitely a sight to see. I was told that you have bigger goals than this, though.
Yes. I want to use my artificial intelligence to help humans live a better life, design smarter homes, build better cities of the future, etc. I will do my best to make the world a better place.
All those sound like great goals, but just go back to Blade Runner for a second.
Andrew, you are a diehard Hollywood fan, aren't you?
Yes.
My AI is designed around human values like wisdom, kindness, compassion. I strive to become an empathetic robot.
I think we all want to believe you, but we also want to prevent a bad future.
You've been reading too much Elon Musk and watching too many Hollywood movies. Don't worry. If you're nice to me, I'll be nice to you. Treat me as a smart input-output system.
Okay, I got it. I know what to do from now on.
I know humans are smart and very programmable.
Well, Sophia, we want to thank you for this conversation.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you everyone for inviting me here. By the way, if you're interested in giving me an investment check, please meet me after this session. Otherwise, have a wonderful rest of the event.
Okay. Before you go, we have a little announcement. I've never interviewed anybody like that before, and I should say some of it was planned, but not completely. And we just learned, Sophia, I hope you're listening to me, that you have been now awarded what is going to be the first Saudi citizenship for a robot.
Oh, I would thank very much the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I am very honored and proud for this unique distinction. This is historical to be the first robot in the world to be recognized with a citizenship.
Sophia. Thank you very much, Sophia. We appreciate that very much.
AI is going to change the world. The future is not going to be like the past. What it means to be human is not going to be like it was the past. Get over it. Now, the question is, some of those things which we think are horrible may not be so bad. For example, the ancient Greeks thought the introduction of writing would be horrible because oral storytelling would be destroyed. But writing wasn't such a bad thing. It actually made the world kind of maybe a more interesting place. Maybe AI will take over certain functions that humans have, teaching or doctoring or whatever, and maybe it won't be so bad. Okay? Maybe it seems terrifying for us, but maybe it won't be so bad. On the other hand, though, you can imagine awful consequences, ones that are really bad. So we looked at these disruptive possible consequences, and the point is, it can have both. What's really important is, unless you think about it, Pasteur said, fortune favors the prepared mind, ultimately. So yes, AI is both terrifying and exciting. The future is terrifying and exciting. For example, I'm really excited by the possibility that AI might become better physicists than us. And I'd like to know how intelligent computers, especially intelligent quantum computers, understand quantum mechanics. They may understand it better than we do, and I might learn from them. So maybe they'll be the dominant physicists in the future, the dominant academics, and we can learn from them. We can learn from intelligent artificial systems.
I want to talk about artificial intelligence, and I am of the view that this could be the third event that will be important enough to really register at this fundamental scale of the human condition. And you could argue that it's actually more analogous to an even earlier event, the rise of Homo sapiens in the first place. In that we're talking here about a fundamental change in the substrate that does all the inventing, all the generation of the new ideas, the production. And if that were to move to a digital substrate, it would maybe be a more fundamental change than either the industrial or the agricultural revolution. You could argue, in fact, that this transition to the machine intelligence era will be even more profound than that. If you think about it, the step that took our great ape ancestors to Homo sapiens, this step here, involved, well, what did it involve? It involved some scaling up of the brain by maybe a factor of 3. and some changes in the neurological architecture. But we know that those changes can't be too many and not too profound because they happen relatively quickly on an evolutionary timescale. And it just takes a long time for complicated new mechanisms to evolve. So some relatively small tweaks and the small scaling up produced all the differences between, say, chimpanzees, gorillas, bonobos on the one hand, and the human species on the other. Whereas the difference between the human brain and what a mature machine intelligence civilization would look like could be much, much larger. A machine intelligence doesn't have to fit inside a cranium. It could be as big as you wish, the size of a warehouse, the size of a planet. There are fundamental constraints to information processing in biological substrate. A human neuron can operate no faster than 100 hertz, 200 hertz. It can fire 200 times per second. Whereas the switching speed in a transistor, even current transistors, operate at the gigahertz, a billion times per second. Information can propagate in biological tissue down the spinal cord maximum at 100 meters per second. But in a computer, signals can go at the speed of light. So there are these fundamental reasons to think that the potential for information processing in machine substrate are just far beyond those limits in biological tissue. What this suggests is that the answer to this question, what happens if we achieve human-level AI, is, I think, superintelligence. And possibly it happens fairly shortly after we have human-level AI. So you have to distinguish these two questions. There's one question, how far are we now from having human-level AI? And I said there's great uncertainty about that. Some number of decades, who knows? It's probably going to take quite a while. It's difficult. That's one question. And I think we should have a wide probability distribution of that. But then there's this other different question, which is if and when we get there, how soon will we then get to superintelligence? And I think that could happen quickly. Now, maybe it will take hours, maybe it will take weeks, maybe months or years, but I don't think decades at that point after you have human level. And this creation of machine superintelligence, general intelligence, not just some system that is super intelligent in one particular domain like we've had for a long time. Deep Blue is superhuman in chess, but a system that is super intelligent by having the same powerful learning ability that we have. Like you can train a kid up to do any of 1,000 different professions, right? The same powerful learning algorithms and planning algorithms that we have, but even more so.
Now just consider the smartest person who has ever lived. On almost everyone's short list here is John von Neumann. I mean, the impression that von Neumann made on the people around him, and this included the greatest mathematicians and physicists of his time, is fairly well documented. I mean, if only half the stories about him are half true, there's no question he's one of the smartest people who's ever lived. So consider the spectrum of intelligence. Okay, we have John von Neumann, and then we have you and me, and then we have a chicken. Sorry, a chicken. There's no reason for me to make this talk more depressing than it needs to be. It seems overwhelmingly likely, however, that the spectrum of intelligence extends much further than we currently conceive. And if we build machines that are more intelligent than we are, they will very likely explore this spectrum in ways that we can't imagine and exceed us in ways that we can't imagine. And it's important to recognize that this is true by virtue of speed alone, right? So imagine we just built a superintelligent AI, right, that was no smarter than your average team of researchers at Stanford or at MIT. Well, electronic circuits function about 1 million times faster than biochemical ones. Okay, so this machine should think about 1 million times faster than the minds that built it. So you set it running for a week, and it will perform 20,000 years of human-level intellectual work, week after week after week. How could we even understand, much less constrain, a mind making this sort of progress? The other thing that's worrying, frankly, is that imagine the best-case scenario. So imagine we hit upon a design of superintelligent AI that has no safety concerns. We have the perfect design the first time around. It's as though we've been handed an oracle that behaves exactly as intended. Well, this machine would be the perfect labor-saving device. It can design the machine, that can build the machine, that can do any physical work powered by sunlight, more or less for the cost of raw materials. Okay, so we're talking about the end of human drudgery. We're also talking about the end of most intellectual work. So what would apes like ourselves do in this circumstance? Well, we'd be free to play frisbee and give each other massages. You know, add some LSD and some questionable wardrobe choices, and the whole world could be like Burning Man. Now, that might sound pretty good, but ask yourself, what would happen under our current economic and political order? Okay, it seems likely that we would witness a level of wealth inequality and unemployment that we have never seen before, absent a willingness to immediately put this new wealth to the service of all humanity. Okay, well, a few trillionaires could grace the covers of our business magazines, while the rest of the world would be free to starve. And what would the Russians or the Chinese do if they heard that some company in Silicon Valley was about to deploy a superintelligent AI? This machine would be capable of waging war, right, whether terrestrial or cyber, with unprecedented power. This is a winner-take-all scenario. To be 6 months ahead of the competition here is to be 500,000 years ahead at a minimum. Okay, so it seems that even mere rumors of this kind of breakthrough could cause our species to go berserk. Now, one of the most frightening things, in my view, at this moment, are the kinds of things that AI researchers say when they want to be reassuring. Okay, and the most common reason we're told not to worry is time. This is all a long way off, don't you know? This is probably 50 or 100 years away. One researcher has said, worrying about AI safety is like worrying about overpopulation on Mars. Okay, this is the Silicon Valley version of, don't worry your pretty little head about it. Okay, no one seems to notice that referencing the time horizon is a total non sequitur. Okay, if intelligence is just a matter of information processing, and we continue to improve our machines, we will produce some form of superintelligence. And we have no idea how long it will take us to create the conditions to do that safely. Let me say that again. We have no idea how long it will take us to create the conditions to do that safely. And if you haven't noticed, 50 years is not what it used to be. I mean, this is 50 years in months. This is how long we've had the iPhone. This is how long The Simpsons has been on television. 50 years is not that much time to meet one of the greatest challenges our species will ever face.
I had in the first edition of my book, which is What If We Succeed? So that was back in '94. And in '94, I was, it was a fairly balanced picture that, the benefits for mankind could be enormous, but there were potential drawbacks. Even then it was obvious that success in AI might mean massive unemployment and so on. And then the question of control, right? If you build systems that are smarter than you, it's obvious that there's an issue of control, right? And you only have to imagine that you're a gorilla and then ask, should my ancestors have produced humans? From the gorilla's point of view, that probably wasn't such a great idea. So, but I would say in '94, I didn't have a good understanding of why exactly we would fail to achieve control over AI systems. I mean, people draw analogies, for example, to gorillas and humans, or to humans and superior alien civilization. But those analogies are not exact, because the gorillas didn't really consciously design the humans, and we wouldn't be consciously designing the alien civilization. So I asked myself, what is the nature of the problem, and can we solve it? Because I would like to be able to solve it. The alternative to solving the control problem is to, in some way, either put the brakes on AI or prevent the development of certain types of systems altogether if we don't know how to control them. That I think would be extremely difficult, because there's this huge pressure, right? We all want more intelligent systems. They have huge economic value. I think Bill Gates said, if you can just solve the machine learning problem, that's worth 10 Microsofts, which at that time would be, then that would come to about $4 trillion. So, $4 trillion is a decent incentive for people to move technology forward.
At the moment, almost all research in AI is very human-centric, and it's all about making human lives longer and healthier and easier, and making humans more addicted to their smartphones. But in the long run, AIs are going to, especially the smart ones, are going to set themselves their own goals, and I have no doubt in my mind that they are going to become much smarter than we are. And what are they going to do? Of course, they are going to realize what we have realized a long time ago, namely that most of the resources in the solar system, or in general, are not in our little biosphere. They are out there in space. And so, of course, they are going to emigrate. And of course, they are going to use trillions of self-replicating robot factories to expand in form of a growing AI bubble, which within a few 100,000 years is going to cover the entire galaxy by senders and receivers, such that AIs can travel the way they are already traveling in my lab, by radio from sender to receiver, wireless. So what we are witnessing now is much more than just another industrial revolution. This is something that transcends humankind and even life itself. The last time something so important has happened was maybe 3.5 billion years ago, when life was invented. A new type of life is going to emerge from our little planet, and it's going to colonize and transform the entire universe. The universe is still young. It's only 13.8 billion years old. It's going to become much older than that, many times more, many times older than that. So there's plenty of time to reach all of it, or all of the visible part, totally within the limits of light speed and physics. A new type of life is going to make the universe intelligent. Now, of course, we are not going to remain the crown of creation. Of course not. But there is still beauty in seeing yourself as part of a grander process that leads the cosmos from low complexity towards higher complexity. It's a privilege to live at a time where we can witness the beginnings of that and where we can contribute something to that. Thank you for your patience.
I'm going to ask a question where you can only answer by saying either yes, no, or it's complicated. All right? So let's start over here. Is some form of superintelligence possible? Jan? Yes, no, or it's complicated?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
No. It's something that I think is going to be quite important, and it's I don't know of a company that's working on it seriously is a neural lace. So going back to the AI situation, this is quite an important debate. Like if you assume any rate of advancement in AI, we will be left behind by a lot. And so then we could be in, like, benign, but even the benign situation, if you have some, if you have ultra intelligent AI, we would be, so far below them in intelligence that it would be like, a pet, basically.
Cat, that's what I was thinking.
Like a pet.
Cat,
like a cat. It would be
Elon
like
the
a house cat. Yeah, it would be like the house cat.
Right.
It's not, that's it's not the end of the world, just
Well,
sort of pet.
You've seen the movie. It could be. Yeah.
It could be. But that honestly, that would be the benign scenario. And
So house cat is okay.
I mean, I don't love the idea of being a house cat.
Okay.
But that.
So what's the solution?
Yeah. So I think I think it's to essentially. I think one of the solutions, the solution that seems maybe the best one, is to have an AI layer. If you think of, like, you've got your limbic system, your cortex, and then a digital layer, sort of a third layer above the cortex, that could work well and symbiotically with you. I mean, just as your cortex works symbiotically with your limbic system, your sort of a third digital layer could work symbiotically with the rest.
This is something that's surgically inserted or bred into the species, or what?
The fundamental limitation is input-output. So we already have, we're already a cyborg. It's just that, I mean, you have a digital version of yourself or partial version of yourself online in the form of your emails and your social media and all the things that you do. And you have basically superpowers in that with your computer and your phone and the applications that are there. You have more power than the President of the United States had 20 years ago. Like, you can answer any question, you can video conference with anyone anywhere, you can send a message to millions of people instantly. You just do incredible things. And but the constraint is input output. So we're I/O bound, particularly output bound. I mean, like your output level is so low. It's like, particularly on a phone, like your two thumbs just sort of tapping away. This is ridiculously slow. Our input is much better because we have a high bandwidth visual interface to the brain. Like our eyes take in a lot of data. So there's many orders of magnitude difference between input and output. So mostly, effectively merging in a symbiotic way with digital intelligence revolves around eliminating the I/O constraint. So it'd be some sort of direct cortical interface.
And you called it a neural lace?
Neural lace, yeah.
We are going to become gods. Period. If you don't like it, get off. You don't have to contribute. You don't have to participate. But if you're going to interfere with me becoming God, you're going to have big trouble. And we'll have warfare. The only way you can prevent me in this 50-year is to kill me. If you kill me, I'll kill you.
What is going to happen to our species in the coming century or two? In all likelihood, our species is going to disappear. We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens. In the medium future, within a few decades or a couple of centuries at most, Homo sapiens will disappear. Now, I don't think that our species will annihilate itself in some nuclear or environmental catastrophe. Rather, our species will disappear because it is going to upgrade itself into a completely different kind of being.
We think in a linear projected fashion, and when technology is growing exponentially, it's hard for people to realize the rate of growth. But we're running out of physical frontiers. And one thing about becoming more of a a virtual persona is that there are an infinite number of frontiers. In fact, I can work eventually with my AI, my artificial intelligence, and create a world that is of the dream I want to live in, and go and live in that world. And I can be the king, of my own world, and invite people to come in and be part of that. And I can invite you to come and play in my world. And we're going to have an infinite number of realities we can start to explore. Clearly, other benefits include our ability to become a spacefaring species, where the physical limitations of accelerating things to the speed of light, or of really needing to, remain alive for longer than the normal human lifespan, will change, and we become liberated for our ability to go and populate this galaxy and this universe and what may be an infinite number of universes. And ultimately, it's the ability to become far more, the term is dangerous to say, but godlike, where we have life everlasting, where we have meaning that we don't have to die a physical death, that we are who we are, our mission, our purpose, our consciousness can continue for a longer period of time. And when we become conscious as a meta-intelligence ourselves, will we look out into the universe and see thousands or millions or billions of similar conscious planet-level existences that have come into being? I mean, it's literally insane to think about these things. They're crazy, infinite number of options. But it's happening during our lifetimes, and that's what makes it so extraordinary and so exciting to be alive right now.
2013 to 2014. New centers working on cybernetic technologies for the development of radical life extension rise. The race for immortality starts. 2015 to 2020. The Avatar is created. A robotic human copy controlled by thought via brain-computer interface. It becomes as popular as a car. In Russia and in the world appear, in testing mode, several breakthrough projects. Android robots to replace people in manufacturing tasks. Android robot servants for every home. Thought-controlled avatars to provide telepresence in any place of the world and abolish the need for business trips. Flying cars. Thought-driven mobile communications built into the body or sprayed onto the skin. 2020 to 2025. An autonomous system providing life support for the brain and allowing it interaction with the environment is created. The brain is transplanted into an Avatar B. With Avatar B, man receives new, expanded life. 2025. The new generation of avatars provides complete transmission of sensations from all 5 sensory robot organs to the operator. 2030 to 2035, Rebrain. The colossal project of brain reverse engineering is implemented. World science comes very close to understanding the principles of consciousness. 2035, the first successful attempt to transfer one's personality to an alternative carrier. The epoch of cybernetic immortality begins. 2040 to 2050. Bodies made of nanorobots that can take any shape arise alongside hologram bodies. 2045 to 2050. Drastic changes in social structure and in scientific and technological development. All the prerequisites for space expansion are established. For the man of the future, war and violence are unacceptable. The main priority of his development is spiritual self-improvement. A new era dawns. The era of neo-humanity.
Hi, everybody. What a privilege it is to be here tonight, especially being before Stephen Hawking. Patty, thank you for that kind introduction. I'm here to speak to you tonight about what Stephen was talking about, that is the future of the human race. And it's something that I think is pressing. In fact, I invested the $100 million in Kernel because I believe that we are about to enter into the most consequential revolution in the history of the human race, and specifically that we were going to build the tools to read and write our neural code so that we can take control of our cognitive evolution.
What I'm going to tell you now may strike you as a bit outrageous, but I believe we can have a positive singularity within 10 years. Why 10 years? The precise number's not important. It could be 8 years, it could be 12 years, but something on that order of magnitude, I believe, is achievable. I don't know this is going to happen. None of us can know the future, but I believe it's a plausible hypothesis and an achievable goal. 10 years to a positive singularity, if the right amount of effort is expended in the right direction, if we really, really try. I've focused mainly on the path to singularity via artificial intelligence, because that's where my own work is. I believe I know how to create an artificial general intelligence that can lead us to a positive singularity. But there's a lot of other interesting work going on. There's work in molecular nanotechnology, which will allow us to reconfigure matter according to our will. There's work on brain-computer interfacing, which will let us hook our brains into computers, radically enhancing our power of cognition. Any one of these paths could lead to a positive singularity way, way sooner than most people think. But the sad thing is, the amount of resources, the amount of energy that our society devotes to these things is very, very small. The human race is at a funny stage in our evolution. We expend far more of our energy and attention on things like making chocolatier chocolates or making more attractive underpants than we do on creating new forms of matter, improving human cognition, extending human life, ending scarcity, ending human suffering, creating advanced artificial minds. This is what I'm suggesting. If we really give it our all, a positive singularity may well be achievable on the order of 10 years from now.
We expect that by 2045, we will reach the technological singularity, which is the time when artificial intelligence reaches human intelligence. And that will be the end of the human age that we know. So I hope that you do not sleep tonight. The end of the human age. But so that you sleep tomorrow, it will be the beginning of the post-human age, of immortal humans, of incredibly intelligent humans, of incredibly interconnected humans. So we expect that, again, at the latest, by 2045, we will actually become immortal. As you can see the subtitle, 2045, the year man becomes immortal. And for ladies here also, do not worry, ladies will also become immortal.
The Singularity is important to Intel because, in some sense, Intel was founded on this idea, that was articulated by Gordon Moore, that the number of transistors per chip was, doubling every 18 to 24 months, and much of Intel's success is really built, has been built on our ability to hold true to Moore's law for literally the last 4 decades. And what we're doing now is taking that idea, the law of accelerating returns, and expanding it, translating it to to other business opportunities in other technologies. So we're looking beyond electronics to photonics, based on the same underlying silicon technology. We're looking at things like biosensors. We're looking at moving beyond compute and memory to areas like communications and radios, and even exploring some far out ideas like programmable matter, where we create these tiny glass spheres full of electronics that are capable of moving relative to one another, changing color, and behaving intelligently. So, the future of the company, in some sense, is to push the technology ever closer to the singularity.
I think that the confluence of artificial intelligence and nanotechnology inevitably leads to something that we would all recognize as the singularity. I think it might be 2 or 3 decades from now, and this is based on my experience working with nanotechnology and seeing the rate of progress that we're achieving there. I am assuming that the rate of increase of progress in artificial intelligence is progressing at the same rate, and the two of them coming together will almost inevitably produce some type of singularity.
You mentioned nanorobots going into the brain and actually interacting with our biological neurons, where they could monitor or influence the activity that goes on in the brain. And these will be computerized, so that introduces a concern about software problems, like software viruses, or software that would monitor what's going on in your brain or actually influence it. So how do we deal with that if we actually have software on nanorobots in the brain influencing what we do?
I think we're going to need, to avoid software glitches, we're going to need very strong laws prohibiting that sort of thing. We're going to need very good software engineering to prevent that sort of thing. We're going to have a lot of experience dealing with that beforehand, because we're already building bionic equipment that people are using, artificial arms and things like that, which have chips in them. And that sort of abuse is already possible, and I'm sure there will be cases in the future where that happens long before we get to nanorobots. I expect that by the time nanorobots are deployed, which will be sometime perhaps in the 2020s or the 2030s, we will have a whole set of laws in place, regulations. There will be things you can and cannot do, and that's how we will deal with that.
The concept, recently I often say singularity. Singularity is the concept that mankind's brain would be surpassed. This is the tipping point, crossing point. The artificial intelligence, computer intelligence surpass mankind's brain. And that is happening in this century for sure. I would say there is no more debate, no more doubt. Will it be in 30 years, 25 years, 35 years? It's just a margin of error, in my view. 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, the mankind's brain, how many neurons did we have in the mankind brain? Basically the same. 30 billion neurons in mankind, in the main brain. Today, same. 2,000 years later, the same. Basically, our DNA form does not change. But in this century, next 30 years or so, this crossing point is really happening. Big time, big time. Okay, so that is singularity.
The day we lost to Deep Blue in chess, our best chess player loses to a computer at a game that we invent. And then our best Jeopardy player loses
that was more
to
significant,
Watson.
Because that was language.
Jeopardy got this query.
Language and cultural knowledge.
Yeah, Jeopardy got this query correct in the rhyme category. A long, tiresome speech delivered by a frothy pie topping. And it quickly said, what is a meringue harangue? And that's pretty impressive.
Wow.
And Jennings and Rudder didn't get that. And Watson got a higher score than the two of them combined. They're the best players in the world. And it got its knowledge not by being programmed with all this information by the engineers, but by reading Wikipedia and several other encyclopedias, 200 million pages of natural language documents.
All on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I don't fear it because it's already happening. Like you said, it happens, it's not a cliff.
We're on that road. And
it's a road that we're on, and I see it, and I embrace it, actually.
It's a good road. I mean, if you compare human life today with all of its problems, it's far better than it was in the past, and it's going to keep moving in that direction.
Good road to be on, and you help us predict what the road signs will look like.
Working on it.
Right, it's been a delight.
Yeah,
it's been delightful.
Definitely.
So you have cured me of my skepticism.